What's up, guys? Walter Lemek here, back with From the Nosebleeds. I decided I'm going to be doing some conference previews leading up to the season opener and, getting the college football season underway. I think it's important to know, teams you should look out for, especially some of these smaller conferences, because, you get teams like Coastal Carolina, BYU that come out of nowhere and start winning a lot of games. This can help you betting wise. This can help you just familiarize yourself with some, underrated prospects that could be going in the draft next year and coming to your favorite NFL team potentially. So I decided I'd start in the conference I probably know the least about out of all 10, and that is Conference USA. I've been doing my research though, so I've put in some time to come up with what I think for predictions, some players to look out for, and then why I like certain teams and things to know. So first, we're going to start out and we're going to look at last year's standings, go over those, just kind of familiarize yourself with what happened last year, in a pandemic year, but still they played, I think, tried to play all 8 conference games, but I think nobody got 8 conference games in Conference USA. I think the most was 7. But anyways, we'll go over the standings from last year. Conference USA is split up into East and West divisions. So I'll go with the East Division first, and we had Marshall at 4-1, 7-3 overall, winning the East. Florida Atlantic, or FAU, finished 5-4 overall, 4-2 in Conference USA play. Western Kentucky finished 5-7 overall, 4-3 in Conference USA. Charlotte finished 2-4 overall, just 2-2 in Conference USA. Middle Tennessee State finished 2-4 in Conference USA and 3-6 overall. FIU was winless in Conference USA at 0-3 and overall 0-5. Old Dominion did not play last year, opted out, and that's the standings on the east side. On the west side, we had UAB at 3-1 and 6-3 overall. UTSA at 5-2 in conference play, 7-5 overall. Louisiana Tech at 4-2, 5-5 overall. North Texas at 3-4 in conference play and 4-6 overall. Rice only played conference games. I believe they had 3 or 4 different coach. Oh no, excuse me. Rice played only conference games, but they went 2-3 in conference and overall. Southern Miss went 2-4 in conference and 3-7 overall. Southern Miss had 3 coaches last year. It might have even been 4. They had a lot of turnover, so the fact that they even won games is kind of remarkable. UTEP went winless in conference play at 0-4, but went 3-5 overall. And as for the bowl results, North Texas played in a bowl game against Appalachian State, and they lost 56-28. If you remember, North Texas had one of the best receivers in the country last year. He is now gone, has since been drafted. In the RL Carriers New Orleans Bowl, Georgia Southern put it on Louisiana Tech 38-3. The Montgomery Bowl between Memphis and Florida Atlantic, Memphis won 25-10. The Camellia Bowl was between Buffalo and Marshall. Buffalo won 17-10. The Serve Pro First Responder Bowl was between Louisiana and UTSA. Louisiana won 31-24. And the Lending Tree Bowl between Georgia State and Western Kentucky, Georgia State won 39-21. So they didn't have a good showing in bowl season, losing all 6 of their bowl games. UAB actually, I believe, did not play in a bowl game, even though they actually won the conference, beat Marshall in the championship game. I believe they had some COVID issues leading up to that game, so they ended up not playing. But they actually are the defending champs of the conference, and they've actually won the West Division of Conference USA 3 years in a row, and I think that's since they've been reinstated. So good things going for that program since they've been back. And now we'll get into some things. I'll give you some players to watch out for. I'll give you some notes on teams that I think will be at the top, my projection or predictions and standings, and then some teams to maybe look at some futures. First, we'll go with the futures. I really, really, really like UTSA at 3-1. Marshall and UAB both are at 5-2, so it's about plus 250. UTSA at plus 300. I think all three of those teams are right there in the mix. Taking the higher one is perfect. You get more value, better price, more winnings, things like that. Another team I'd take maybe a flyer on or over on their win totals is Charlotte. The flyer would be 40-1, so that's plus 4,000 if they were to win Conference USA. But I definitely take over on their win total. I think they're projected around 6 wins this year. I think they could get to 7 or 8. I really like who they return. They return a decent amount of starters on both sides, but even those that aren't returning starters, they're upperclassmen, so they've been in the program. They know what's expected of them. Will Healy did a great job in his first year. They were engaged in a lot of locker room celebrations after wins and things like that. They had a lot of good momentum going into 2020, and pandemic happened. It was a weird year for them. I think they get back on track. I think they're closer to 7 wins than 6 wins. So I really like them. Next, we'll get into my predictions for the conference as a whole. Out of the East, I think Marshall defends the crown. I think the other teams in the East are going to compete and give Marshall problems, but at the same time, I still think Marshall's too good, and maybe some of these other teams are about a year away. So I like where Marshall's at. Charlotte, I've got second. I know a lot of people think they're probably in the 4th range, but I think these next 3 teams could go any way, you could argue. I just like the returning pieces that they have. I'll hit on a couple of them here later. I like the returning pieces that they have, and I think it's better than the next 2 teams. And I don't think they have as many question marks as the others. Florida Atlantic, I have finishing 3rd in the East. I think they have very good defense that's returning. They've got one of the top, better defensive units, in my opinion, returning. There's some question marks on the offensive side, which is kind of flipped from how it was when Lane Kiffin was there. They've got a good defense, solid defense, and question marks on the offense. Their coach is Willie Taggart. I think he's a good coach, especially at this level. Maybe not the best for a power conference, but I think in the group of 5, he is a very good coach. I think Western Kentucky is the 4th best team, and I say that because they're replacing a lot. I think they only bring back 4 starters on both sides of the football. So there's not a lot returning. 5 on offense and 4 on defense. Not a lot returning. Bailey Zappi, the quarterback, actually played a decent amount last year, though. So technically about 10 starters returning. So I think there's just going to be a little bit of a drop off. I'm sure this full offseason will help, though. There's still a team that can cause problems for those upper tier teams in this conference and could make things interesting. After that, I've got Middle Tennessee State. I think they're building something decent, but I don't think they're quite there yet. I just think the other teams are better, have more going for them. They return a decent amount of people, are starters, so they could make some noise, but I still think they're a little inexperienced, and they're about a year away, in my opinion, from really competing in the conference. Next, we got FIU, Florida International. Panthers last year did not win a single game, and actually almost won their first game at Liberty, but ended up losing. They had a lot of close games, close calls. Couldn't quite pull out some wins. I think they'll pull out a couple wins this year. I think they get 3 or 4 wins this year. So their win total is probably around 2.5 to 3. I'd say, probably take the over because I think they'll get more things to go their way this year with the full offseason. And, Butch Davis has done a pretty good job down there in his 4 years as the head coach. Old Dominion is the next team I have in the East at the bottom of the list. They didn't play last year, and they don't really return a whole lot, only returning 7 starters from 2019. And I think just the fallout of not playing last year is going to hurt them. I think these teams who didn't play at all last year are going to hurt. I think that's the case I'm making here. We'll go to the west side. The West side, I've got UTSA. I think this is the most balanced team in the conference. That's why I have them here. And like I said, I think they're going to win the whole thing. After that, I've got the defending West Division champs in UAB. They've probably got the best returning defense, but there's some question marks on offense that will need to be answered. Louisiana Tech, I think, is third. And I think this is another team that could surprise a lot of people because they are very young. This is a young team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They've got an experienced quarterback, but they've got some younger pieces around him, especially on that offensive line. And then on defense as well, they've got a lot of young pieces. So there's a lot of potential there, but I think they're about a year away. After them, I've got the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. They've got some young pieces as well. Experience not very high on the offensive side of things. They returned a lot of starters from the defense. They had a lot of turnover and in terms of coaches and things like that, as I mentioned. So I think it's, this is the first year where they start to build, that culture, that winning mentality. I think they'll be competitive, but probably get some bad breaks. And that's why I have them at number 4. After them, I've got the North Texas Mean Green. They lost their best receiver in the draft, as I mentioned. Pretty good quarterback coming back in Austin Noon. But they've got younger pieces around him than they did last year. They've got some good young wide receivers. Again, I think they're about a year or two away from really competing. This offense could be very good, though. Put up a lot of numbers. I'm not so as sure about the defense. Defense had a lot of holes last year. Hopefully, they can get some of those fixed and get some more wins. After them, I've got Rice. Rice was kind of middle of the pack on offense and defense. They returned an average amount of starters. I just think everybody else ahead of them has more talent. I think they've got a couple more years of building. This is Bloom Green's 4th year, so maybe they give him a little more wiggle room, but this could be his last year at the helm. And at last, I've got UTEP. UTEP returns a decent amount as well. Dana Dimmel has not done much for UTEP in his first 3 years, and I don't expect much of an improvement this year. I think UTSA beats Marshall in the title game. I've mentioned that. Take that plus 300 to win the conference. It's a very good team. I'll get into some players from this team to watch out for. I think they're just the most balanced offensively and defensively. They finished top 5 on offense, and they finished in the top 6 on defense. I think their defense will take a step forward, and they'll be in the top 5 offensively and defensively for the conference this year. I think they'll be a very balanced team, like I mentioned. Marshall, I think, has the most dynamic returning offense coming back. I think they'll be very explosive on offense. I think the question marks is the defense good enough to keep up with the offense? I think UAB has the opposite problem. They've got probably the best defense returning. They were a very good unit last year as a team. I think it'll be the same case this year. I just think there's question marks on the offense, whether or not they will be consistent at quarterback, issues with the line last year, I think, or they've got question marks with the receivers. They lost a decent amount at the skill position sets. The offense has the question marks, but if they can produce at a consistent clip, they'll be right up there again this year. I just think they lost a little too much at the skill sets on offense. I think, again, UTSA, most balanced team. I mentioned that. Charlotte, talked about them a little as well. They're very experienced. They could be sneaky good team that comes up and surprises a lot of people. I know most of the experts have them more in the 4 range on the east side or more in the bottom half in the conference as a whole. But I think they're sneaky good. I think they've got a lot of good pieces. Big question mark is going to be the defense. They will score a decent amount of points, and I think the defense didn't show great signs last year. They replace a lot. If that defense can hold up and keep teams lower scoring, and the offense can hold on to the ball and not have as many turnovers, this will be a sneaky good team, and again, I think could make their way towards the top of the conference. Florida Atlantic has the opposite problem as Charlotte. They've got a they had a very strong defense last year, and their offense struggled mightily. The good news is they returned a lot on offense that played last year, and I think they'll be a little better and could compete. I think Charlotte and FAU, you could interchange those teams. I think they will both push Marshall and potentially come out of the east side. Next, I've got Western Kentucky. I mentioned it when going through them in the standings. I think they're, just replacing a lot. This is a team still, though, that's very well coached, and they always get a lot out of their players. They've got a really good quarterback. I think probably the second best quarterback in Conference USA. So if he could carry them, maybe, I never ruled out a team with a really good quarterback, especially in college football. And I mentioned Louisiana Tech, very young, but very talented. Now we'll go through some players to keep an eye on. First and foremost, I think Grant Wells out of Marshall, probably the best quarterback coming back, and he will be on a lot of people's preseason first team all conference list. I think he's very good. I think Bailey Zappe for Western Kentucky is probably the second best returning quarterback, like I mentioned. He'll put up some very good numbers. And then Chris Reynolds, a senior, a little undersized, but another talented quarterback, and he plays at Charlotte. Sincere McCormack is a running back whose name you need to know. Guy put up over 1,400 yards rushing last year. He'll probably put up more this year, and he'll be a big reason why that I think they win Conference USA. The other reason why will probably be Zachariah Franklin, wide receiver. He's a junior. I think he's 6'1", about 185. I think he'll be put up some good numbers. He'll have a few 100-yard games. I think 6 or 7. I think he'll get over 1,000 yards and catch close to 10 touchdown passes. I think those two will be a big reason why UTSA wins the conference. Another name, you're probably familiar with his dad, Frank Gore Jr. Yes, that is right. Frank Gore's son plays at Southern Miss. He showed signs of being pretty dynamic, and I think you'll see it a little more as he gets a full off season to really get his legs under him. And I think he will be part of this Southern Miss rebuild. Had a lot of things going on, as I mentioned, with the head coaches, but he's stuck around, and I think he'll be a big reason why in a few years maybe they win the conference, or they're at least competing in the conference. The last name I want you to keep an eye on is out of Charlotte, Victor Tucker. I think he's probably the best returning receiver in my opinion. I think him and Chris Reynolds will combine a lot, both seniors, both hungry to win, and I think they'll be a big reason why Charlotte has a bounce back year and gets things rolling under Willie Healy. That's all I've got for Conference USA. Next, we'll preview some action. Let me know what you think, what your thoughts are, and how I can improve this series in the comments below.